No piece of musical equipment has haunted me quite like the Altec RS124 has. It feels like the unicorn of the mixing world, a mystical and legendary beast with magical properties. Famously used by the Beatles at EMI/Abbey Road Studios, this unit has left a massive sonic fingerprint on music history. And if you know me at all, you know I'm a huge fan of anything Beatles, especially their equipment. Alongside the U47 and the Hofner bass, this compressor was always that someday piece of gear. Too rare, too expensive, too luxurious to be mine. Until now. Lang Electronics and Heritage Audio have resurrected a legend. This is the P-Lane Type 436 all-tube Very-Mu compressor.
We interrupt this program to bring you an Altec fun fact. This unit is called the Type 436 because the RS124s used in Abbey Road were actually modified versions of the American-made Altec 436B. They were modified by EMI to include an output attenuator and release control, as well as tube substitutions and circuit modifications.
Heritage Audio is not the first to attempt reviving the RS124. There have been other imitations throughout history, such as the Listen Grove AR1, the Highland Dynamics BG2, the Retro Instruments Revolver, and most faithful of all, the Chandler Limited official RS124 remake. However, so that's what makes so exciting. And I gotta say, I think that this one looks the most beautiful visually. But before I get into that, I have to appreciate the Beatles style packaging and branding. The box shows the real Penny Lane Street in Liverpool, rendered in a style that really reminds me of the Eleanor Rigby scene in Yellow Submarine. And calling it the P-Lane is just, without even hearing how it sounds, this thing just makes me happy to look at. It's a dream of mine that has come to life, and it means so much to me to have it in my rack. If you're obsessed with this kind of stuff like I am, I'm sure you can relate to this, but I had a chance to use a Chandler RS124 in a studio before receiving this unit, and seeing it felt like meeting a celebrity. So now, having one my own, it's like becoming friends with that celebrity. And let me be clear, this is no cheap imitation. The thing is solid and heavy as hell. The front plate is thick and the chassis is sturdy, and the top is vented, so your music can breathe. The chicken head input and output knobs are giant and commanding, and are stepped with 4 clicks per number with gentle indentations. That has made recall super easy while still allowing fine control over the settings. The teardrop style knobs are gorgeous, and to my absolute delight have little treble clefs on them. And just listen to this. And this. This compressor sounds good, and I'm not talking about how it sounds. I love the retro red jewel power lamp, and the submarine style VU meter is also gorgeous, although it doesn't have a meter lamp. The original didn't either, but I love glowing VU meters, so I might try to install my own at some point. I located a 6-volt rail that would be easy to tap into, but getting the lamp into the VU meter is another story. Perhaps a project for another day. Anyways, upon opening it, we're greeted by 3 new old stock tubes and 2 input and output transformers. These tubes glow a bright orange when powered on, and the vented top not only allows that glow to be admired, but also helps release the considerable amount of heat that this unit generates. The top of the chassis gets almost too hot to touch after a while. It's gonna be good for winter.
Altec fun fact. At EMI Studios, each RS124 was known to have a slightly different attack speed. Engineers would often find the specific serial numbered RS124 for the attack characteristic they wanted on a given source. These serial numbers are even printed on the Chandler RS124, but luckily the P-Lane also has a variable attack time control.
On the front plate, you get your standard input, output, attack, and release controls. Now, because this is a Very-Mu compressor, it has a fixed threshold, so you control the amount of gain reduction by driving the input, and then attenuating the output to your desired level. So then what is this DC threshold knob? Think of it more like a knee or even ratio control, with 1 being a more gentle slope and 6 acting more like a limiter. On the release, or historically accurate, recovery control, you have this bonus super fast setting, which allows for snappier release times than on a typical RS124. These 2 bonus features make this unit shockingly versatile, which is very welcome in a modern workflow. On the back, there are both TRS and XLR inputs and outputs, which I always love. Now, before I can talk about how it sounds, I have to address something peculiar about this unit. Sewell Studios was the first channel to review this compressor, and has a great series of videos on it. I've followed Sewell for a while now, so I was very excited to see his video on the P-Lane. However, when he compared it against some other RS124 style compressors, he noticed that the P-Lane behaved differently.
There's really no way to sugarcoat this. The P-Lane sticks out like a sore thumb.
It was much more reserved with its compression, needing to be driven harder to get the same results as the Chandler. This also meant that it was not able to be driven into extreme amounts of compression. This is when Heritage Audio stepped in and recommended a simple mod that would remove the intentional input pad. All you do is just snip resistor 19 by the input transformer. Now, why was the unit designed this way? Heritage Audio has a great video covering the subject, but the idea was that back in the 60s, audio ran much quieter than modern day line level signals. In order to get this unit to behave similarly to how an RS124 would have behaved at EMI, they padded the input to compensate for the hotter input signals. That checks out, as Jeff Emmerich recalls sending Paul's bass on Rain through the Alt-X multiple times in order to flatten the dynamic range, and perhaps it wouldn't have been necessary if the input signal was as hot as it would be in a modern studio. That's a very reasonable approach, and I appreciate Heritage Audio's attention to such details. However, I like being able to drive my tracks into extreme compression if I please, especially because you can get some serious tube character out of this unit if you pin the meter. Heritage is considering making this modification a switch, which I very much support. But as I discuss the sound of this unit, and as you hear sound samples, keep in mind that you're hearing the P-Lane with the Sewell modification.
Alt-Tech fun fact. The original RS124 featured a unique hold setting between every release time, which essentially paused the compressor at its highest amount of gain reduction. As these compressors were often pushed into extreme gain reduction, this made quiet sections or room ambience raised to the same level as the loudest sections of music. The hold control was used as a sort of analog look-ahead, where the loudest part of a track could be played and the reduction in volume could be paused until the loud part occurred, and then the engineer could switch it back to their desired settings. And this was used on the track Helter Skelter to ensure that the opening guitar note didn't leap out too much before the compressor could clamp down on the guitar. This feature is faithfully recreated on the P-Lane.
If he says that he can love you better, I know he's not gonna see it through. If he says that he can love you better, I know he's not gonna see it through. Pass him by, just come a little closer. Pass him by, just come a little closer. Pass him by, just come a little closer. I do, I do, I do.
Baby, I don't wanna go, wanna throw all your love away. I don't wanna go, I wanna stay. So tell me your love's here to stay. Stay. Baby, don't blow out the flame. Tell me that we'll be okay. Tell me your love fits the frame. Tell me your loving is here. Tell me your loving is here to stay with me.
All time is an ocean pounding on the shore. This beautiful castle, just a memory forevermore, forevermore.
I think it sounds fucking incredible. It's pillowy, velvety, smooth, and I'm gonna say it. Warm. Say what you will about that word in audio, but in this case it's true. It puts this beautiful gloss over the high end, not muffling it, just smoothing it out. And it has that beefy, tube-flavored low end. It's just glorious. I've begun closing my eyes as I dial in the compression so I'm not swayed by the meter, and I've been surprised to open my eyes and see just how much compression I'm choosing to go with. It's so smooth that you can push 10, 20, 30 dB of gain reduction on the meter, but with none of the guilt. It seems to preserve the emotions within the dynamics of the performance while still controlling the volume. I specifically love it on bass, just as the Beatles engineers did. And I've learned that it's best to dial it in while listening to the whole mix, not just the bass and solo. With extreme settings in solo, the unit brings out a ton of gnarly high-end harmonics, and it can often sound like too much. However, in the context of a mix, these harmonics blend right in, and you're left with this round, rubbery bass tone that I've been chasing for years. These harmonics are still there, and they help the bass be heard on smaller speakers like cell phones, but you can get away with more than you might think. The controls are perfect, and they're just vague enough that it inspires experimentation. Without knowing exactly what I'm doing, I can hear the changes I'm making clearly, and I can confidently land on settings I'm happy with within moments. The super fast setting and the variable ratio/knee control are fantastic, and allow this unit to get dangerously close to Fairchild territory with the right settings. There have been many situations where I know that the second fastest recovery time would have been too slow, and I would usually have to resort to using a different compressor if not for the super fast setting.
Altec, fun fact. At EMI Studios, the Fairchilds were seen as the snappy limiter, and the Altecs were the slower compressor. Where the Fairchild saw most of its use on drums and vocals, Altecs were used for bass, guitars, and bus squashing.
So what could have been better? If we're gonna really nitpick, I would have preferred a more linear scale on the gain reduction meter rather than this logarithmic scale. The difference between 0 and 1 is twice as large as the difference between 10 and 20, and honestly, I'd much rather have more resolution in that range. And in the original, the difference between 10 and 20 takes up most of the meter. Cause honestly, who's buying this unit to do half a dB of gain reduction? This is where I really feel like it's clear that Heritage Audio saw this more as a tracking device than a mixing device, but that's not really how I've been using it. Another thing to mention is that this unit takes two different types of fuses, one for American voltages and one for European voltages. I blew through both of the European fuses, so I had to purchase some for American voltages. Not really a problem. Another thing is that the indentations on the output knob don't directly line up with the numbers, at least on my unit. Again, not really a problem, but a little annoying. And of course, in the future I would love to see a switch for the input pad, instead of having to perform a modification. Also, a stereo version, or at least stereo linking options would be incredible, especially because it sounds so good on drums and piano.
Altec fun fact. Altec now makes cheap pharmacy counter Bluetooth speakers and headphones. Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
But aside from that, I really have nothing but good things to say about this thing. I know $800 might sound like a lot, but for what's under the hood, it's a steal. It looks good, it feels good, and I think it sounds 95% as good as the real thing, at around a quarter of the cost. I don't feel like I've compromised on my dream of owning an Altec compressor, and I'm so proud to finally have one of my own. I'm also so lucky to have received one for review. Thank you so much to Heritage Audio for sending one over. And thank you, the viewers. It's because of you guys that this small dream of mine could come true. Until next time, take care.